less, I would imagine, to do with the comments that's specifically about the monument. But since I woke up this morning at 3 o'clock in the morning, I figured I should be faithful to at least the thoughts that I had in my mind, and I actually got up out of the bed and sit and wrote it down. So here's what came to my mind. I listened to Glenn yesterday. You know, we went on the tour of the property. And at the end, he sort of wrapped up as he always does, and he was very eloquent. And he talked about Fort Monroe and its potential as a symbol and a center for the beginning of freedom in America. As I laid in my bed thinking as opposed to resting, I thought about a book I read not too long ago by a scholar named Edward Baptist. The book was entitled, "The Half Has Never Been Told." It was one of the most difficult books I've ever read on the subject of slavery, capitalism, power, and profit. It quoted statistic after statistic and told story after story of suffering and humiliation and degradation and pain in the name of avarice and wealth and power. One phrase stood out from Glenn's comments yesterday. He said, "This is our time." He said, and even though he didn't say it in these words, I think what he was saying was, this place called Fort Monroe is the place we have been given to take our stand. And that no less than the highest definition of liberty and justice for all will do. One nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Not just words, but standards of behavior. Not just platitudes, but words to live by for those who believe it is past time, for those who believe in the rightness of our charge to stand for one nation under God, indivisible with liberty and justice for all. That book by Baptiste reveals the underbelly of a time when we were at our worst, when we fomented hatred and racism and inhumanity over liberty and justice for all. That fact is too pervasive to hide, too diabolical to ignore, too painful to be repeated over and over again and embraced as if it were a time when America was at its best. What I'm saying and what I think Glenn said is this is our time. This is our watch. The decision we make today, the decisions we make today, and at every subsequent board meeting will define our legacy. What will it reveal about us? 50, 100, 200 years from now, what will this place say about who we were and what we believed? My prayer is that when the future looks at our past, it will be obvious that we stood for one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ellis. Thank you for being a member of the authority, and thank you for those very thoughtful comments. We much appreciate your input. Is there further commentary? Yes, Mr. Jones.
I'd like to offer a second motion, but before I do that, I'd like to ask whether you think a second motion is timely. First part of it would be to suggest and see if we can get a sense of the board that immediately upon the availability of funds, interpretive signage be placed at the foot of the memorial arch to properly contextualize and interpret Jefferson Davis's role in the Confederacy and slavery and so forth, pending what time it takes to make an ultimate decision about what happens to the arch. It's not interpreted properly, and I think it needs to be done. I won't offer that resolution unless you tell me it's timely to do so. And then I think, unless, again, there's a reason, I think we ought to have a vote of the board on the question of going through the proper procedures under the National Historic Preservation Act to ultimately remove the arch. There's a procedure and it'll take time, I understand that, but I think it would be good for the board to be on record in favor of removal.
Well, I think since the motion on the floor right now is to be in receipt of the letter, but then I think it would be appropriate to have that discussion, because basically that's a sequential action that would be prompted by the letter and other considerations. So I think that would be entirely in order, but let's see if we have any further comment simply on the receipt of the letter from the governor at this point. Is there any further comment? There being none, all those in favor of recognizing and...
Do you want public comment before the vote?
Oh, yes, I didn't realize we had public commentary. So we